All right, let's dive into one of the most fascinating prophecies in the entire Bible, Daniel chapter 11. What's so wild about it is how our source material shows it describing a real historical king with jaw-dropping accuracy. And then it seems to just pivot. It starts talking about another king, one who is still to come. So how does that work? Let's break it down.
Right from the get-go, the prophecy paints a pretty clear picture of its main character. He's not called mighty or noble or anything like that, nope. The word used is despicable. And he's not going to inherit his kingdom the old-fashioned way. He's going to snatch it through schemes and deception. That really sets a specific and kind of sinister tone for everything that follows.
So who are we talking about here? Well, according to our sources, this prophecy points directly to a man named Antiochus IV Epiphanes. His rule is without a doubt one of the darkest chapters in Jewish history. And as you're about to see, the historical record of his life lines up with Daniel's prophecy in a way that is just uncanny. So the prophecy said he'd take the kingdom by intrigue, right? Well, history backs that up completely. Antiochus wasn't even supposed to be king. The real heir was out of the picture, a hostage in Rome. So Antiochus swoops in, plays the part of the friendly uncle, the regent for his little nephew, all while using flattery and bribes to get what he wanted. There's even a good chance he had the kid heir, well, removed from the picture. You can see why some people didn't call him Epiphanes, God manifest. They called him Epimanes, which means the madman. Kind of tells you everything you need to know.
And the prophecy gets even more specific. It says this despicable king won't just brush aside armies, he's also going to shatter someone called the Prince of the Covenant. This tells us his fight isn't just political. He's going head-to-head with a major religious leader.
So who is this Prince of the Covenant? He's widely identified as Antiochus III, the legitimate high priest in Jerusalem. See, Antiochus pushed back against Antiochus's big project of Hellenization, basically forcing Greek culture and religion on everyone. Antiochus didn't like that one bit. So he had Antiochus removed, sold the high priesthood to the highest bidder, and eventually Antiochus was murdered. Check. Another part of the prophecy fulfilled.
The prophecy also points out something really unique about his style. It says he'd get power with just a small group of followers, using deception and spreading around plunder to buy people's loyalty. And historically, that was Antiochus's MO. He didn't roll in with giant armies like the kings before him. Nah, he used politics, pretending to be a protector while he was actually just looting the place to make his allies rich and loyal. It was a whole new playbook. Get this. The prophecy even describes a specific meeting. A negotiation where two kings sit down at the same table, both smiling, both speaking lies, and both planning to betray the other. And guess what? History tells us about that exact meeting between Antiochus and the young Egyptian king Ptolemy VI. They sat down for a peace treaty that neither of them had any intention of honoring.
But Antiochus's smooth talking and scheming was about to hit a brick wall, a really big brick wall. His ambition was about to put him on a collision course with a brand new global superpower, leading to a moment of public humiliation so intense it would change absolutely everything.
So, in 1680 BC, Antiochus decides to invade Egypt again. But this time, things are different. The Roman Republic, the new big kid on the block, decides it's had enough. They send out an envoy, a guy named Gaius Popilius Lanas, to deliver a message. And this sets the stage for one of the most intense stare-downs in all of ancient history.
Okay, picture this. The Roman envoy meets Antiochus on the dusty plains outside of Alexandria. He lays down the law from Rome. Get out of Egypt now. Antiochus, probably shocked, tries to buy some time, let me talk to my advisors. But the Roman wasn't having it. He literally takes his staff, draws a circle in the sand around King Antiochus, and says those famous words. Basically, you're not leaving this circle until you give me an answer. Can you imagine the humiliation? The great king completely shut down in front of his own army. He had no choice but to tuck his tail and retreat.
Fuming, totally embarrassed, and powerless to strike back at Rome, Antiochus did exactly what the prophecy in verse 30 said he would. He turned his rage against the Holy Covenant. He marched his defeated army back towards Judea, and he was about to make Jerusalem pay for his own epic failure in Egypt. And this leads to the prophecy's most chilling phrase. It describes his ultimate act of revenge as the abomination of desolation. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was a full-on spiritual assault aimed right at the heart of the Jewish faith. In 1670 BC, Antiochus made Judaism illegal. Reading the Torah, observing the Sabbath, circumcising your child, all of it became a crime punishable by death.
Then he walked into the sacred temple in Jerusalem, stopped the daily sacrifices to God, and did the unthinkable. He sacrificed a pig, an unclean animal, on the holy altar to a pagan god. This single act was the historical abomination of desolation, and it's what ignited the Maccabean revolt, the very event that's celebrated today during Hanukkah.
So, up to this point, the prophecy in Daniel and the life of Antiochus match up with mind-blowing precision. But our source material argues that right here, something changes. At verse 36, the prophecy seems to leap beyond Antiochus and his time period altogether. Just listen to the language here. It shifts dramatically. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god. Whoa, the scope suddenly becomes absolute, global. This doesn't sound like the regional political squabbles we were just reading about, does it?
You see, that first part of the chapter is all about the historical beef between the Seleucid king of the north and the Ptolemaic king of the south. But from verse 36 on, those titles just vanish. The camera zooms in on this one single, final king who isn't just fighting other kings. He's trying to take on God himself.
This is where our source draws a line in the sand. The conclusion is that this last section of Daniel 11 isn't about Antiochus anymore. It's a prophecy about a completely different ruler, a final world leader who will show up at the very end of time. And that brings us to the million-dollar question. If we try to force Antiochus into the rest of this prophecy, from verse 36 to the end, does it still work? Does history still line up? Well, let's take a look at the evidence the sources present.
The prophecy says this future king will set himself up above every god. Well, Antiochus honored the Greek gods like Zeus. It says he'll have no regard for the gods of his ancestors, but Antiochus kept the family's religious traditions going. And here's the biggest one. The text says this king will die in Israel, and that his death will kick off a time of unprecedented trouble and even a resurrection. History is crystal clear. Antiochus died in Persia, which is modern-day Iran, and none of those cosmic, world-ending events happened.
So what gives? How can he be a perfect match for half the prophecy and a total mismatch for the other half? Well, the source material introduces a really important idea here, something called a prophetic type. Think of it like this. Antiochus was the dress rehearsal. He was a real person in real history who acted out a pattern. His life and his horrible actions were a smaller, regional preview of a much bigger show that's still to come. A final end-times ruler who will take what Antiochus did and do it on a global scale.
In the end, what our source concludes is that the stunning historical accuracy we see in the first part of Daniel 11 is there for a reason. It's there to make us trust what it says about the future. The life of Antiochus serves as a historical blueprint, a warning of what a ruler who sets himself against God looks like. It's a pattern that the text says will repeat one day. And that leaves us with this final thought. Maybe prophecy isn't just about telling the future. Maybe it's a warning, written in mercy, so we can all understand the times we're living in.